The spiritual realm is absolutely fucking real. Abundance mindset, how rich people think, how to achieve success with the help of the mind. Ooh. Or some kind of philosopher's stone, if you know what I'm saying. In the end, it turned into this. Once again, actual fucking magic. And as my madness grew, along with various synchronicities obviously, visions, supernatural abundance, I myself have a friend who has not 9 subscribers but 9 million. And I myself will soon reach 900,000 subscribers on TikTok and Instagram just posting some AI slop scattered across the flat disk of our flat earth. Patriarchy, you got it. Society is becoming more and more genocentric. People are becoming more and more like cattle, which apparently Freemasons and some other ethno-religious group, which I will not name yet, sometimes legitimately consider us to be, while women are sinking more and more into literal Satanism, the great mother goddess. If the hardest worker became the richest, then the donkey on the farm would be the most successful and richer than the farmer. Society has forgotten the sun. Society has forgotten the swastika, you might say. Somewhere recently, either on Twitter or YouTube, I saw the word retard maxing. Modern new age spiritual feminists masturbating to their mother goddess. The mother opens the vaginal gates. In order for someone's vagina to give birth, someone must first fuck that vagina with their dick. To fuck this life with your dick. What's up, motherfuckers? This will be a free-flowing conversation in which I will tell my story about how I spent 5 years studying and practicing what the self-help literature industry and content in general has to offer. And also magic, that is traditional occultism or new age practices, magic in general of any kind, esotericism. I will tell my story, I will tell you how little it actually gave me, reading all this literature, resorting to all these practices, turning to training in the traditional Rosicrucian Lodge, and so on and so on and so on. And in the end, in addition to exposing my own mistakes, so to speak, I will offer what I think is the most sensible grain of truth that I have been able to glean from all these years of experience, in order to brighten up all this negative storytelling of mine with some positive grain at the end, some positive message, some positive advice. I'll start with the fact that as a teenager I was an atheist. Yes, originally I was raised in an Orthodox environment, and of course I eventually returned to the Orthodox Church already consciously. But as a teenager, I was an atheist. And this evolutionary mechanism came into play, evolutionary mechanism of child psychology development, which pushes you to seek the truth outside of your family. To seek foundation for your worldview wherever it may be outside the paradigm of one's parental home. And I started reading all kinds of nonsense like Richard Dawkins and thinking that I was the smartest person in the family, started arguing with my parents and so on and so forth. But as in many other similar cases, my atheism was ultimately cured by knowledge. I received a traditional education where I was forced to take philosophy courses, and at some point I also became interested in psychology, and in particular psychoanalysis, specifically Jungian psychoanalysis. Jungianism and postmodernism in general served as a window into the metaphysical world for me. The otherworldly, the surreal, the hyper-real, the spiritual world. At some point, it became quite obvious that the spiritual realm is absolutely fucking real, absolutely influential, and a thinking person can hardly avoid interacting with it, and indeed, every second person in general. The first book that started my magical journey, so to speak, was a book by Aleister Crowley. I know maybe it's not the best option to start with, but that's how I started. I was inspired by Aleister Crowley's principle of scientific illuminism, which proclaimed the kind of scientific method for achieving spiritual goals. I was inspired by this open, inclusive definition of what magic is in Crowley's Thelema tradition, and that all used to fit rather well with some postmodernist tendencies of mine, perhaps relativism of postmodernity, as well as a love for voluntarism, Nietzsche, Jung, and so on and so forth. And the first book was, I think, it's called Liber Abba, or Book 4, Liber 4, I don't know, on the mysticism. Book by Aleister Crowley on the mysticism. That's when everything began for me. Then I actively studied all other occult traditions, whether ancient or modern, practiced everything, interpreted dreams, studied the astrology, Western astrology, meditated. All this was accompanied by a large number of synchronicities, which more and more convinced me that I was supposedly on the right path. At some point, when things started to get worse in my personal life and in the whole world, in the lives of my fellow tribesmen, that is after the war began, and various tragedies and misfortunes in the lives of many, my spiritual life began to take on a more serious intensity and depth, such a heavy seriousness. And then I discovered myself in the Orthodox tradition. Over time, I realized that this was the very truth with a capital T. And indeed, personally, it seems to me that Jesus Christ has saved me more than once. From clinical depression, which I refused to treat in the traditional way for modern medicine with antidepressants and overcame on my own. In relationships with loved ones, and in life in general. But today's topic is not orthodoxy, but rather heterodox, you might say, magical approaches and practices, coupled with the self-development industry, self-help, and so on, manifestation, that crap. At some point after my new life had more or less settled down, I found myself somewhat disoriented, away from home as a result of forced emigration. I continued my general development, self-development. I continued to develop physically, practicing martial arts. I continued my career as a student at a new foreign university and continue to study to this day. Now I am more consciously pursuing a master's degree in the antiquity, have a job that is not the worst, but not the best either. But in general, I can say that despite all this, there was a feeling of some incompleteness in my life. I always felt that something was missing. I am an ambitious guy myself. I had very, very high, difficult to achieve goals in life, always, from the very beginning. I always wanted to achieve exceptional heights. I wanted exceptional results. And at some point, after discovering myself within the Apostolic Orthodox tradition of the Church, I realized that the teachings of Jesus Christ and the Church may contain the fullness of truth, but nevertheless, they are not self-sufficient for solving all life and everyday issues. That is, yes, you are a Christian, but that does not mean that you do not need to brush your teeth, for example, or clean your house, yes? And it means that you will still need some techniques to achieve worldly success in a worldly life. That was my logic, at least. Moreover, Jesus Christ, as we know, can heal you with a pharmacological pill as well, meaning via worldly manners as well. That is, everything begins with the Church and with the awareness of the spiritual center and communication with God the Father, but not everything in your worldly life has to end there. On the contrary, it is wrong, as the saints write at least, and as our priest periodically reminds us in the sermons. It is wrong to just pray and then sit still. No, you have to take action. Faith without works is dead, as we know. And the Lord Jesus Christ was a hard worker. He had calloused hands, like these ones. But for some other reasons, obviously. Because he was a hard-working carpenter. That's what I'm trying to say. So it was natural that in addition to the orthodoxy itself, at some point, I began to immerse myself specifically into self-help literature, self-help content, the self-development industry, and reading everything that literally fell into my hands. All these books about like abundance mindset, how rich people think, how to achieve success with the help of the mind. Ooh. All this modern new age, you could say, new thinking psychology, which at one point was popularized by people like Bob Proctor, Brian Tracy, etc. But which is preached also by most modern millionaire creators, content creators in the US. And because of that, in addition to just reading a huge number of self-help books, I also consumed only this kind of internet content. I always had the algorithm on any of my social networks set up in such a way that on Instagram, on YouTube, etc., I always had content only about how to improve my life, only about how to work with my own consciousness, only about how to program the unconscious, only about how to perform magical, alchemical work to achieve success, or some kind of philosopher's stone, if you know what I'm saying. But it started out as just self-help, and in the end it turned into this. Once again. At first I consumed a huge amount of the popular basic books, you might say. But then gradually I moved to more mystical and esoteric characters in the spirit of Neville Goddard. I believe you understand. Which obviously was not the limit of my research. And in the end, it turned out that most of this kind of pulp fiction is written by magicians and initiated esotericists. Who could have thought? Literally, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, initiated characters who are literally involved in magic. Actual fucking magic. At first, I didn't realize this for some reason, and didn't expect such a surprise. But in the end, I gradually moved away from ordinary, secular, you might say, scientific or secularly psychological self-help, and once again started reading magical literature. At some point already as a Christian, I found myself reading books on alchemy, Freemasonry, Taoism, paganism, postmodern magic, like chaos magic, for example, reality transurfing, manifestation, all of this fucking nonsense. And all of this led me back to the occult, to the traditional fucking occult. From that moment on, I began to live even more like a hermit. I delved deeper into myself, and as my madness grew, along with various synchronicities, obviously, visions, and spiritual, mystical, religious experiences in general, which my spiritual father in the church always treated with considerable skepticism and advised me against. I thought that I was on the verge of discovering some very, very important and mysterious secret, which in turn, once I solved it, would give me supernatural abundance and accordingly the solution of all my problems. That is why I spent all my free time studying my main subject, my new main subject, that is magic. And since this new turn, this new beginning of my magical journey, probably a year and a half passed. And for the last year and a half, all I've been doing is literally waking up, quickly doing my main office type job, responding quickly at seminars at the university, and then just fucking reading all the books, meditating, just fucking exploring traditional occultism and its symbols. At some point, it became clear that if I really wanted to, the mystical spiritual experiences along the way might never fucking end. And even more so, the flow of new authors, new traditions of new literature and new content creators would never end. In the end, it became clear that I would never review all the lectures. I would never read all the books, even if I lived 200 years. And this is what came of it. Now there is a huge number of endless symbolic interpretations in my head, endless conspiracy theories also, endless mythological archetypes, you might say, and approaches to their deconstruction in a more academic sense even. A huge number of useless words and names, guys. But there is no trace of what I thought I was doing it all for. Namely, simply achieving excellence, status, financial success, and prosperity. And an abundance of achievements, desires that have tormented my heart since childhood. As a result, I decided to start this YouTube channel to do at least something. Let it be slapdash. Let me not know everything. Let me not know the opinions of all the Freemasons who ever wrote on the subject, of each of the degrees, of each of the Masonic rites. Even if I haven't unraveled the mystery of each of the alchemical engravings, haven't read all the existing Gnostic texts, and haven't watched all the videos of all the existing manifestation gurus, I decided that I had to start doing something, anything. At least something productive and active, finally. And even though right now the most viewed video of mine, the HD video, has only pathetic 18 views, and my most popular short video has only 1200, and my channel has only 9 subscribers, to be honest with you, I'm starting to think that this simple, straightforward action, without understanding what, why, and how, without deep theorizing and careful programming of the algorithm of action, has brought me much more than all these years of studying spiritual literature. Because reading all these occult tomes gave me literally 0 subscribers. While this dumb action without any positive guarantees or positive predictions, just completely random, gave me as many as 9. Some might say, well, 9 subscribers is almost 0. Some might say in the comments, I myself have a friend who has not 9 subscribers but 9 million. And I myself will soon reach 900,000 subscribers on TikTok and Instagram just posting some AI slop in the reels. But guys, I'll be honest with you, I'm inspired by the thought that 9 subscribers is 9 fucking subscribers more than 0. If it makes sense. And there is something sacred and mysterious about it from a mystical point of view. It's not for nothing that all modern assessments of our historical past, of various civilizations scattered across the flat disk of our flat earth, are evaluated as patriarchal societies. Patriarchy, you got it. It is not for nothing that all feminists attack the experience of past civilizations as an experience of patriarchal oppression of the feminine principle, the matriarchal principle. Indeed, wherever you look, Babylonian civilization, Christian civilization, Zoroastrianism, whatever, the modern world is built on the patriarchal principle. It is not just the domination of men in secularly analyzed and dissected institutions, be they power structures, educational institutions, and so on, but these civilizations were also patriarchal in a spiritual sense. It is not just that the Christian God is also God the Father and God the Son incarnate in man. Alchemists can argue and write treatises on the Mysterium Conjunctionis, of the alchemical marriage, of the sun and the moon. Taoists can draw yin and yang in a round circle as much as they like. Freemasons can worship their black and white chessboard and two columns representing the opposition of two opposite polarities in the spirit of Hegel's thesis and antithesis, which incidentally was most likely also inspired by Hermeticism. But there is something very important and essential, as it seems to me, even from the point of view of an ordinary modern spiritual seeker, in recognizing the superiority of the masculine solar principle over the feminine passive and lunar. There is a certain pattern. Society is becoming more and more genocentric. Great personalities such as Plato, Magellan, Nietzsche, Goethe, Mozart, Bach, Michelangelo, Newton, Tesla are becoming fewer and fewer. Society is beginning to turn into slaves of the matrix, and the matrix, by the way, also represents the same matriarchal feminine principle. People are becoming more and more like cattle, which apparently Freemasons and some other ethno-religious group, which I will not name yet, sometimes legitimately consider us to be. And at the same time, it is women who are becoming more and more spiritual, while men are becoming more and more dryly materialistic. And matter, by the way, also, if you start studying anthropology, psychoanalysis, even Freud, you will understand that matter as well represents the same feminine principle. Parallel to all these processes, men are becoming more and more quote-unquote rationalistic atheists, mocking both New Age and Christianity equally, while women are sinking more and more into literal Satanism. Literally, not metaphorically, not figuratively, but literally satanic practices. Gardner's Wicca, Telema, tarot cards, astrology, manifestation, and so on, which in essence are the same as Luciferianism if these technologies are used without the authority of God. That is, women are becoming more and more spiritual, delving deeper and deeper into their spiritual iteration, beginning to literally worship the great Mother Goddess, beginning to tell stories on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok about how Christianity oppressed feminine spirituality, and that we need to remember our roots, return to Mother Nature, and worship the Mother Goddess. And at the same time, the world is on the brink of nuclear war. Men hate their lives. We see this in the suicide statistics. Great discoveries, great achievements, great adventures inspire the hearts of young boys less and less. None of the adults live legendary heroic lives anymore. For modern men, it has become a real challenge to even just get off the fucking couch and pay attention to something other than watching a football game, a Netflix series, or a YouTube video where men fight with women and argue about feminism. And it's clear that action, and I hope you already understand that action is implicitly the central and overarching theme of my video today. Action without a certain inner spiritual work can lead nowhere at all. If the hardest worker became the richest, then the donkey on the farm would be the most successful and richer than the farmer. It is clear that in dry, spiritless, unconscious action you can simply bang your head against a wall and get lost in the Minotaur's labyrinth and stumble upon a dead end that you cannot cross. However, if I were offered or even ordered to put my money, the little that I earned through the ordinary labor of my ordinary office job, on spirituality of modern society, then I would say that society has forgotten the sun. Society has forgotten the swastika, you might say. Society has forgotten courage. Society has forgotten the obelisk. Society has lost the sacred action. The active penetrating Mother Earth principle, called either the Logos or the fire, is no less primal than the feminine representation of chaos as the prima materia of alchemists. It seems to me that modern people, and even more so modern men who are in one form or another of spiritual search and self-actualization, must first of all remember that creation is primarily an active act. Somewhere recently, either on Twitter or YouTube, I saw the word retardmaxing. I didn't delve into how modern internet users define this word, but I think I intuitively understand it, and I think it's something very fucking useful. You have to just do it. Buy yourself some Nike. I don't know, conspiracy theorists will say that it's Saturn ring or something demonic, but just remind yourself that, like Shia LaBeouf, sometimes the only way out of a crisis, of a mental cage in your life, is Nike's slogan, just do it. Well, even without conspiracy theories, it's clear that the name is in honor of the ancient Greek goddess, but today's video is not about criticizing heresy, idolatry and paganism. The theme of the video is the triumph of spiritual masculinity, primal fundamental masculinity over femininity. Spiritual feminists, let's call them that, modern new age spiritual feminists masturbating to their mother goddess, love to talk about how the mother creates, the mother gives birth, the mother opens the vaginal gates and brings new life into the world. But remember the basic lessons of primitive anatomy that everybody probably knows from childhood. In order for someone's vagina to give birth, someone must first fuck that vagina with their dick. If you've watched this video up to this point, my last piece of advice to you is to fuck this life with your dick. With your spiritual dick. Or maybe even your physical dick. But don't fall into the sin of fornication. I'm not going to advise that, of course. But finally, start acting, guys. Acting. Don't be such a nerd like me who has spent a huge part of his life in books that hardly gave him what he expected. And as always, now, good luck in your spiritual work, dumbasses. Peace.